Tina. Right, good morning everybody. Great to see so many of you here, and welcome to the 2025 Fenland SOIL conference. Exploring the future of Lowland agricultural peat, addressing the practical challenges. So together we are at a crucial crossroads, a moment in time where the choices that we make in managing our lowland peatlands will have lasting impacts on our environment, our economy, and the future of agriculture in the Fens and our other lowland peat regions. It's fitting that we've gathered here in the heart of the East Anglian Fens, one of the most productive and unique landscapes in the UK. We're here today to engage in deep, meaningful conversations about how we balance sustainability, innovation and productivity in a landscape that's been shaped by human ingenuity for thousands of years. I hope that you will leave here tomorrow with new connections and that our networking opportunities spark future collaboration. I would like to take a moment now to thank our conference partners who have made today possible. So big thank you to our sponsors Buffalo Logistics, Fens, the Environment Agency via the LAP WDP grant scheme, G's and Hudson's for your invaluable support. As we gather here today to discuss the future of agriculture in the Fens, it's important that we take a step back and reflect on the history of this remarkable landscape. To understand the complexity of the challenge we face today, we must first acknowledge how the Fens came to be and how human interaction with this landscape has shaped its evolution over thousands of years. More than 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, Britain was still connected to continental Europe by land. At that time, the Nene and the Ouse rivers flowed into the River Rhine as tributaries, and the area that we now call the Fens was part of a vast forested landscape. This period marked the beginning of significant climatic changes that would eventually give rise to the unique wetland ecosystem we know today. As the ice sheets melted and the climate warmed, sea levels began to rise, causing rivers in the Fens to empty more slowly into the North Sea. The result? Formation of inland lakes and a complex network of streams and marshes. Over time, peat began to form and accumulate in the low-lying areas, building up over the fen clay. As centuries passed, the Fens transformed from a dense forest into a thriving wetland, a landscape of water, reeds and sedge beds. It was an environment teeming with wildlife, from fish and birds to a host of unique plant species that would become emblematic of this landscape. The Fens were, in essence, a highly productive landscape, one that provided ample resources for the early settlers who arrived thousands of years ago. Evidence suggests that as early as the Neolithic and the Bronze Ages, people were adapting to the wetlands by constructing timber trackways, which helped them to navigate the marshy terrain. This marks the beginning of an ongoing human influence on the Fens that would continue to shape the region for millennia. Later, when the Romans arrived, they too saw the potential of the Fens, not only as a source of natural resources, but also as a place to establish important trade routes. Roman ports sprang up on the edge of the Fens, marking the beginning of large-scale human intervention in this landscape. However, it wasn't until the medieval period that large-scale attempts to control the flooding and harness the land for agriculture began. The medieval monasteries that flourished in the region, especially Ramsey Abbey, which at the time was one of the richest in the country, capitalised on the natural abundance of the Fens. The trade of eels, which was so abundant in the waters, became so prominent that they were even used as currency at one time. The Fens, in many ways, were a model of human ingenuity and resourcefulness, yielding not just food and building materials, but also an ecosystem that sustained both livelihoods and economies at the same time as highly specialised species. However, as time passed, the unpredictable flooding of the Fens became a growing challenge. Landowners and farmers increasingly sought ways to control the water and make the land more predictable for agriculture. This desire for change led to one of the most pivotal chapters in the Fens' history, the great drainage schemes of the 17th century. In 1630, the gentlemen adventurers, a group of wealthy landowners and investors, began to take bold steps to drain the Fens. Their aim was simple: to reclaim the land for agricultural use. They were incentivised by large grants in return for their investments in drainage infrastructure, a move that began to shape large-scale human manipulation of the Fens. The drainage process, however, was not without controversy. In the 1650s, the Dutch engineer Cornelius Vermuyden was hired to design and implement a drainage system that included the construction of new drains and wind pumps. This scheme was met with fierce opposition from the local inhabitants, who became known as the Fen Tigers, a group of people determined to protect their livelihoods and their way of life. Despite the resistance, the drainage process continued, and the steam power of the Victorian era made drainage more efficient. And by the late 19th century, the battle to drain the Fens had been largely won. However, the consequences of this human intervention would soon become evident. Oxidation of the exposed peat began to shrink the land, causing significant subsidence. As the peat shrank and the land lowered, drainage systems had to be constantly updated, leading to deeper drains, higher banks, and much more powerful pumps. Today, the Fens stand as one of the most productive agricultural regions in England. Despite making up only 4% of the land area, it produces 7% of England's food, including a third of the country's fresh produce. The region is now home to an extensive network of farms, packers, processors, input providers and hauliers, meaning that 1 in 6 people who live in the Fens are employed in the agricultural supply chain. Our drainage and our water management is very carefully managed by internal drainage boards and the Environment Agency to keep our communities safe. However, the situation today is so much more complex than it first appears on the surface. With climate change bringing new threats, including rising sea levels and changing weather patterns, managing the Fens is becoming increasingly difficult. The subsidence of peat is ongoing, and the land continues to shrink as more carbon is released into the atmosphere. The Fens are now caught in a delicate balancing act. On one hand, they are one of the most productive agricultural regions in the country. On the other, they are highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change and environmental degradation. So why have I shared this history with you? We're here to talk about sustainable agriculture and farming for the future, not to delve into the past. The reason is simple. The Fens, as we see them today, are a product of thousands of years of interaction between humans and nature. They are now as much a man-made landscape as a natural one, and this means that as we move forward, we will need to work with, adapt to, and manage the landscape to ensure that it continues to meet our needs. In December 2020, the Climate Change Committee released its 6th carbon budget, a comprehensive plan for the UK's path to net zero emissions. The report highlighted the significant role that peat soils play in carbon emissions. It is now well understood that oxidation of peat soils through drainage results in the release of carbon dioxide. The technical report, aligning the peatland code with the UK peatland inventory by Evans et al., which was published in 2022, quotes average emissions of 27 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per hectare per year on crop peatlands. Our own Fenland SOIL flux tower data is challenging these assumptions and is feeding into updated emissions factors for lowland agricultural peat, providing data for soils at different levels of degradation. We have observed emissions from organo-mineral soils at 8 to 12 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per hectare per year, and from deeper sites at 22 to 24 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per hectare per year. The Climate Change Committee made a clear recommendation in their report. By 2035, 47% of the UK peatlands should be restored. And by 2050, 79% should be either re-wetted or under sustainable management. This focus on the lowlands, especially the Fens, is critical. The Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate Change reported in October 2021 that 40% of Cambridgeshire's emissions come from agricultural land use on peat. We believe that this figure is an overestimate and are working to collect more data to enable a more accurate estimate to be made. This report sparked the creation of a new group, led by John Shropshire, to address the challenges of peatland management in the Fens. Initially called the Fenland Peat Committee, this group became the foundation for Fenland SOIL, a rebranded initiative that now represents our collective commitment to addressing these key critical challenges. Since its inception, Fenland SOIL has made strong progress. In just a few years, we've grown from 8 farming members to more than 45, with a further 21 corporate partners that are also supporting us. We've leveraged over £1.1 million in funding to fund key projects that are driving real change. We launched the UK's largest commercial polyculture trial and mapped more than 40,000 hectares across 10 drainage boards. We commissioned Anderson to Easton to produce our Fenland Economic Report. We hosted numerous farmers' dialogue events, including barbecues, farm walks, seminars and open days. We've become the voice of farming on Lowland peat in the Fens. We won at last year's Fenland Business Awards and Ely Hero Awards. We commissioned a water catchment study that will soon be improving water management and sustainable farming practices. We've led field trials on the soil science of re-wetting peatlands, which are providing valuable data to help guide future mitigation efforts. We've advocated for better management of Fenland dikes and waterways, which are crucial for improving the overall ecological health of the region. Back in 2023, we hosted our first conference, which I think many of you were probably at, and supported the 2023 IUCN Peatland Programme Conference of the same year as it came to our region for the first time. Our efforts have not only influenced local practices, but are also feeding into national policy and academic research, helping to drive change at the highest levels. The next 5 to 10 years will be critical in shaping the future of the Fens and farming on Lowland peat. Our priorities for this time period include mapping soils across the rest of the Fens and working with national partners to expand this critical work elsewhere, improving our understanding of greenhouse gas emissions from different soil types, crops and mitigations, investigating the impact of sustainable agriculture and regenerative principles on peat soils to develop new sustainable practices for this specific soil type, ensuring lowland ditches are recognised as ecological equivalents to hedgerows, unlocking their potential for improving biodiversity and connectivity across the landscape, and providing new funding to farmers for better management, working with drainage boards and other key stakeholders to improve water management systems, taking a landscape-wide approach to addressing the challenges of farming and climate change in the Fens, collaborating with our other lowland agricultural peat regions to tackle our shared challenge as a united front, communicating our research more widely and lobbying for the right support for farmers. Overall, our aim as an organisation is to become the leading organisation on sustainable farming on lowland peat and peat soils. And now I'm going to take a brief pause to hopefully share with you our 2024 conference video. If it will work.
Fenland SOIL was formed in 2021 in response to the Cambridge and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate Change report, which stated up to 40% of carbon emissions in the East Anglian Fens come from draining and farming peat soils. But that's not the whole story. 33% of the UK's fresh vegetables are grown in the Fens, and 1 in 6 people are employed from farm to fork. Fenland SOIL was created to tackle this head-on, bringing together farmers, researchers, policymakers, NGOs, and landowners to address the challenge and shape a sustainable future. Our mission is to unlock solutions for managing lowland peatlands, reducing carbon emissions, while safeguarding productivity. In 2023, we hosted our first conference, uniting diverse stakeholders to open up crucial debates about the future. Over the last 2 years, we've leveraged over £1.1 million in grant funding to facilitate critical projects that make a real difference. We've run the UK's largest commercial polluter trial, worked across 7 drainage boards mapping 40,000 hectares. Our water catchment study is already producing evidence to reduce pinch points, improve water flow, and support sustainable land management. We're leading field trials to understand the soil science of re-wetting peats. We advocate for better management of Fenland dikes and waterways, paving the way for future funding under SFI schemes. We're not stopping there. Our contributions to the New England Peatland Map and our first economic report are driving change at the highest levels of government, academia, and industry. Our growers are the voice to media for sustainable farming issues in the Fens. Through sharing knowledge, building partnerships, and advocating for science-based solutions, together we will shape the future of Fenland farming. Join us in making a difference.
That video will be launched on our website today and out on social media, so you'll get another chance to have a look later on. So just to finish up, Fenland SOIL is more than just a project. It is a movement, a commitment to preserve, regenerate and protect one of the UK's most vital landscapes. It is an ongoing effort to safeguard the future of Fenland farming for our communities and for the generations that will come after us. The conversations and collaborations we will have over the course of this conference are not just about sharing knowledge, they are also about finding tangible solutions to these complex challenges. Our goal is clear: to develop sustainable farming practices that safeguard the future of our peatlands, restore the health of our ecosystems, and reduce the environmental footprint of our farming systems while maintaining their economic viability. We recognise that the solutions are not one size fits all. The complexity of these issues requires collaboration across disciplines, sectors and regions. Each of us brings unique expertise and perspective, and it is through shared commitment and cooperation that we will forge a path forward. I encourage each of you today to engage fully, challenge our assumptions and contribute your expertise to shaping the future of agriculture on Lowland Peat. Together, we can create a model of sustainable farming that is both productive and environmentally responsible. And it is now my great pleasure to hand over to Minister Zeichner for his address. Thank you very much.